Canadian Light Source in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 land in the traditional territories of the Nihilak, Cree, Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations, and the homeland of the Métis. As educators, we respect Indigenous ways of knowing and oral traditions. We dedicate ourselves to moving forward in the spirit of partnership, reconciliation, and collaboration.
So I'm Bernie Petit. I am an education coordinator with the Canadian Light Source, and today we are here with Meghan Allen. And Meghan, would you like to introduce your job title and what it is that you do for the Canadian Light Source?
Absolutely. So my job title here is Biological, Chemical, and Occupational Health and Safety Lead. So you can kind of imagine that has kind of three different areas. Firstly, I am responsible for the biological safety program here. So what that entails is any projects that are going to come in that involve biological materials, everything from soils up to live animal experiments that happen here. I'm responsible for reviewing all of that and making sure that it's within our regulatory requirements and in our licensing requirements with a whole bunch of different agencies to make sure that it's done appropriately and that we have the right safety mitigations in place. I'm also responsible for assigning and approving all of the research projects that come to the facility. So every time somebody is going to get beam time, I'm responsible for assigning that project for review with a whole host of different subject matter experts, just depending on what the materials in the project are, and then reviewing that and approving it so that they can come and do their beam times. That's another really large part of that role as well. I'm also responsible for the oversight of the chemical program, although my background is not in chemical safety. So I do really rely on the people that are in my team that do have a very high level of chemical expertise, but I am responsible for the oversight of that program. And then lastly, and which is very new to my portfolio, is the Occupational Health and Safety Program. So again, I have an oversight of that program. I've not been directly involved with occupational health and safety up until really a couple of years ago. So there's still lots that I'm learning. And again, I do have some really good subject matter experts on my team that are able to assist and provide information on that. But I am responsible for that on site as well. So if you're not familiar with what occupational health and safety is, it's really a lot of regulatory requirements and a lot of what facilities and businesses have to do in order to make sure that things are safe for their workers. So it's a lot of regulatory requirements and a lot of paperwork and a lot of documents, but it's ultimately really rewarding.
Awesome. Thank you. That sounds so exciting and so complex. So with that, that complexities and that's a very different directions of duties that you cover. So what is your education background in like, how did you go from going to post-secondary to ending up at the Canadian Light Source in this area?
Yeah, it really wasn't on my career path to end up in the career that I'm in now, but I definitely wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's incredibly rewarding and really dynamic, which are things that I really enjoy about my job. So I started in high school being really interested in health studies and like biology and movement and things like that. So my goal coming out of high school and into university was to become a physiotherapist. So at that time, the physiotherapy program was a 2-year undergrad and then a 3-year program. And they were in the process of changing that to a master's program, which means you had to get a degree and then apply to physiotherapy. So I had 1 year that I could actually apply to the undergrad program before they moved it to the master's. And to prepare for physiotherapy, there are a lot of undergrad classes that you have to take that are very science and lab focused. So I tried to do all of them within 4 semesters. And I think you can probably imagine was not overly successful trying to do such a heavy course load. So I was unsuccessful in my application to apply to physiotherapy. And once that didn't pan out, I really wasn't sure where to go or what to do. And at that time, all the course applications were all still done on paper. So I happened to flip over my paper, and this program jumped out at me that was food science and applied microbiology. And I thought to myself, wow, that sounds really interesting. I'm really interested in microbiology and the study of that sort of thing. So I went and met with the student advisor. He was absolutely fantastic and totally sold me on the program, and I started the next semester. And so food science and applied microbiology is kind of twofold. Part of it really focuses on industry and how different products are made and the quality behind them and the safety behind them, making sure food that comes out of really large production facilities are safe, and learning about how things are produced on such a large scale and stuff like that. And the other half of it is all microbiology and virology and all that sort of stuff. So you really learn a lot about life at a very small scale, and all the different bugs and all the different kind of microbes with effect on food, and how those kind of all play in together. So that's my undergrad. So once I completed that, I started working in the food industry. For a small company in Saskatoon. I started as a quality assurance assistant and then became a technician, and then had the opportunity to become a quality assurance manager. So because it was a small company, I managed the lab where all of the samples came in to make sure that what we were making met specifications and was safe. And also I was in charge of the research and development program. So being part of that was also really interesting because I got to work with a lot of really large food manufacturing companies to develop really special products for them. So if you've ever seen like the Grains First crackers that Dare makes, I actually worked on developing all of the blends that go into those crackers. And some different stuff with Gerber and Pepperidge Farms and things like that. So it was a really interesting job to have. And then I went on maternity leave from that position, and happened just to be scrolling one day through potential job opportunities, and the one that I'm in now came up, and I thought, oh wow, does that ever look really interesting? And I kind of just applied, not really thinking much of it. And then about a month later, I got an interview, and a couple weeks later after that, I was notified that I was successful with this position. So I decided to kind of take a little bit of a right turn from where I was in the food industry, and come over to research and learn a little bit more about biosafety and kind of what that entails. So a little bit different from what the initial, I think, career path was coming out of my undergrad, but a lot of parallels because they kind of go back and forth. So I was able to really build on that, and it's provided just a huge opportunity to continue to learn and grow in some stuff that I'm really interested in.
That's amazing. And so to hear your story, so now more on a personal level, I heard you say that you went on maternity leave. So what is it like trying to balance your home life and being a parent, as well as this dynamic career that you have?
It's really hard, for sure, but it's also really rewarding. Stepping away for an entire year from a position is really difficult, and you're really worried, am I going to be replaced, or are things going to change so fast that I can't keep up with it? And I've done that twice. So I have 2 children now. And that part is really overwhelming, especially with the amount of perfectionism that is in me. I really like to have a lot of oversight, and I really like to be involved. So just to have to step away for that for an entire year was really difficult. And then coming out of that, just trying to balance really just timelines, because you're at work for 8 hours and you're focused on what you're doing. And I was very used to being like, okay, well, if I have extra things to do, I'll just stay and I'll finish them up and I'll make supper later. But you can't do that with a child. So it takes is only open so long, so it really became a matter of me focusing on work for, you know, that 8 to 4:30, and then completely switching gears and coming home and just being a mom and being part of the family, and really trying to compartmentalize work me versus home me. And it was definitely a transition. It still is a transition. I have a 6-year-old and just about 4-year-old. And it teaches me something new just about every day on how to manage my time and how to really stop being work Megan and be home Megan.
Right on. Okay, so having good boundaries, closing that work door and opening your home door, having that transition is an important part of our lives, for sure. Now, what about your career? Are you in a male-dominated career? Is this something that you, you know, do you experience that kind of dynamic in your work?
I have experienced it. I will say that the CLS is incredibly inclusive and very supportive of a diverse community of employees. So that's a really wonderful thing to be a part of. In the food industry, I was definitely a minority there. And in the biosafety world, it's kind of, I think, about a 60-40 split. So there's a lot more balance of men and women. In the experiences that I've had, I have really found that as a woman, I need to be very confident and very assertive. And that, you know, oftentimes women can sometimes be overlooked or not considered that they maybe have that level of expertise. So I've always tried to be just incredibly confident in what I know and assertive in the way that I present it to make sure that I'm heard. And that's been really positively received for the most part in just a wide variety of different things. So as long as you can really speak to what you know and know what you're speaking, that's been a really positive experience for me.
That is great advice. So be a confident woman, even if you're in a male-dominated environment. That's great advice. Thank you. So now I want to kind of dive a little deeper into your career. Okay, so we know that we have to follow all these safety regulations. So that means that you have to know a lot of regulations and laws that govern that. So if someone likes to read laws and those things, this could be a good career for you. But what are some of the like interesting samples, or like what are people bringing into the Canadian light source that they have to get safety approval for? And are there some items that are more exciting than others?
Yes, definitely. That's actually one of the most favorite parts of the job that I have, is just how dynamic it is. And although I'm not actively doing research, I get to kind of participate in the background and see what people are doing. And that's just really one of the most rewarding things that I do here. So one of my very favorite projects that was done by one of our employees here, she had to import the eyes of a pilot whale. I think I actually sent you a picture of those. So it was when we did get them imported. So that was my role there, was to figure out how to get them from where they were. They were donated by an Inuit colony in the Faroe Islands. So they had harvested the pilot whales for their community, and then they had donated the eyes for research, and it was to look for mercury contaminants. The eyes are really susceptible for mercury in the water. So I was able to help her import them. And then she let me see them, and it was straight out of like what you would think of like just a science movie. They were floating in formalin in these like little glass jars. So it was just like incredibly cool to get to see kind of something like that come to fruition, and to be part of that research, even on just the back end, to allow her to get those samples to be able to conduct that research was super rewarding.
That's amazing. What an exciting thing to see up live or in person, right? So,
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So what was your first job? Was it as exciting as your job that you have now?
Like my very, very first job ever.
Very first job. What was that like?
My very first job was at, I don't even know if it exists anymore. It was at a clothing store called Blue Notes. And I was, I think it's still called Blue Notes. Anyway, I was like a clothing, I don't even know what you'd call it, assistant.
A retail?
Assistant, there we go. Yeah. So still a lot of customer service, I would say, and getting to interact with different people, but vastly different from being involved in any sort of science or research or anything like that. So that was my very first job.
That's good to hear that even if we have jobs that we start off in, you always learn skills that you bring to your career, right?
Yeah, I've really taken that kind of all the way through, even in being in high school and just involved in extracurricular activities. The things that I did there definitely prepared me and gave me, I think, a lot of things that I'm able to still apply to work and to my life just as an adult woman. It's incredible to like go back and look at those experiences and say like that helped shape me to the person that I am today, for sure.
Right. That's great to hear. So what advice would you give students when they're choosing a career?
The advice that I would give them is not to put all your eggs in one basket and to go into it with an open mind. Maybe you do have something that you're really interested in or something that you're really passionate about or that you think you're passionate about, but you really can't predict where that's going to go or what's going to happen. And to try to decide the rest of your life at 18 is a very difficult thing to do. Some people do it really well and they know what they want and they go out there and they get it and it's everything they thought that it would be. That was not the case for me. I ended up in a completely different career than I had anticipated in, and I would not change that for the world. I'm absolutely in love with my job and the career that I have, and I would go back and do it all over again. So keep an open mind.
Don't necessarily have everything planned out right away, but follow your passion or what your interests are, and things will happen for you along the way that you'll like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Okay, that's awesome. That's great. So what else could you share with us in your career that you think that students, young people, youth would benefit from hearing? What is some of the advice that you would give an 18-year-old you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think to look at the whole picture, because there's always going to be, things about a job or a career that you really love and things that you're not super crazy about, but it all just kind of comes as a package. So really to look at the whole thing and what really is super important to you, and to focus on those things and accept the other things that maybe aren't as exciting or as crazy. This job has given me just a ton of different opportunities that I never thought would be possible. So I've had the opportunity to travel to Europe to see different synchrotrons and to get to build some of those relationships, and throughout Canada to build. It's a really small community for me. So we have a really tight-knit group of different biosafety professionals in a wide variety of different roles, like medicine and research and university and private sector, and stuff like that. So it's just been such a great learning experience and such a great opportunity to be able to build and connect kind of those different relationships. So focus on the things that you love, but don't let some of the small things that maybe you don't love quite as much stop you, because there isn't going to be anything that's absolutely perfect that you're just going to only get to do those particular small sets of things. It kind of comes as a big package, and just overall to just keep an open mind and continue to just try to build and grow and see where it takes you.
Wow, that's just an amazing answer. I love that. I think that's great advice for an 18-year-old you or any other individual out there. Really, it is. So my last question is going to be, many of us and many students go along and they get all these safety trainings. What is safety like? We really apply safety much more at the Canadian Light Source than anywhere I've ever experienced. So why is there such a safety factor, and what is the role of safety in our world? And relating that to a young person who has to go and take some random trainings and can't really see what am I doing this for?
For sure. So there is like safety and risk in absolutely every decision that we make every single day, whether that's, deciding to get in a car and drive to work or cross the street or, choosing to maybe drink that milk that doesn't quite smell so great. I mean, you make those choices based on risk every single day. So in every decision that you make, whether it's teeny tiny or a gigantic life-changing decision, there is risk in absolutely everything that you do. And that's really where the safety things come into play. You know, we have seatbelts and we have safety systems in our cars to make sure that we can get from point A to point B. And we have crosswalks and things like that to allow you to safely get across the street without getting hit by a car. And we have best before dates to make you maybe like stop and double check before drinking that milk. So the safety is really inherently built into literally everything that we do. So when you start to get into a career for safety, or you have to take some of those safety courses, you might not be able to apply it to something really short term, or, you know, if you're really focused on a specific thing, there might be different implications. You wouldn't believe the amount of safety requirements and regulations that are just around everything that we do, whether it's, you know, how big the stairs are apart, or how wide the gaps are in the railings, or how you get to change a light that's way high up in the air, or how you handle chemicals and how you protect your eyes and your hands and your body and your, you know, all that sort of stuff. So it's really everywhere. And when you really come down into it, it's all risk-based and it's all hazard-based, and you identify the hazard, and then you figure out how to make it safe for the person to be able to do that task. We are federally regulated at the CLS, which means that we have to meet or exceed the federal requirements for safety. And it's very prescriptive in the laws and the regulations what we have to meet. We are the only synchrotron in Canada. So we have a little bit of a spotlight on us for how we conduct ourselves. So we really strive hard to make sure that we're meeting all of the regulation and all of the regulatory requirements so that we can continue to do research and that we can continue to support science in Canada and around the world.
Yes, that does make sense. So if you are taking safety trainings, if you're working at the Canadian Light Source, you're using those safety trainings regularly. Yes, it is a part of your daily job. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. If anyone has any questions about health and safety standards within a synchrotron, they can contact the education department and we can forward any more questions to you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, take care.